Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pandora Matherlees, and as Luxury Director of IORMA, it is my pleasure to invite you to this webinar this afternoon, The Future of the Luxury Industry and Who or What Influences the Luxury Buyer. I would like to start by telling you a little bit about IORMA, because I'm not sure how much you would know about IORMA already, although maybe you've read something. IORMA is a global consumer commerce centre. It is a neutral resource supporting business and government. So what does IORMA do? IORMA's purpose is to understand our 7.8 billion global consumers and how they act, how they operate, and how they choose products and services. So it's very much a resource for business and industry, as I've said, and it's very much just looking at social changes in society and how that drives consumers, and also technical changes in society, how new technology is enabling goods and services to reach the consumer in a more effective, efficient, and great way. And this is something that John Andrews, our chairman, has been very passionate about throughout his working career. So that's IORMA. A couple of points on housekeeping. You have below you a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A throughout the webinar. We will be running for about an hour. So use the Q&A, please don't use the chat box, and we will try to get to your questions, although we have a lot of our own, to ask our panelists. So first, I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have a very eclectic mix across a range of brands and services in luxury. A lot of experience here, I would say virtually around the table. And I would like to start by introducing one of our luxury brands. This is Jonathan Beckett, CEO of Burgess Super Yachts. Jonathan, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm speaking to you today from Athens in Greece. And I've been in the same job for the last 39 years. I was the second employee into Burgess, and today I'm the CEO and owner of Burgess. And we specialize in everything to do with super yachts. So sale and purchase, new construction, charter, operational management, crewing, insurance, the whole 9 yards. So any questions you have, I'd be delighted to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And now Ian Burton of Aspinall. Ian, I'd like to turn to you. Could you say a few words about yourself?
Sure, of course. Yes, I'm Ian Burton, the founder of Aspinall of London. Aspinall, the brand, punches possibly way above its weight. A lot of people think we're already a £500 million brand. We're actually pre-COVID, 40 going on 50 million revenue. Obviously, post-COVID is a different story. But the business used to have 10 stores in London, 20 million revenue online, 25 million of revenue in retail. So from that perspective of a fast-growing luxury brand, I hope I can give some contribution to this panel.
Thank you, Ian, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'd like to turn now to third panelist, John Kofi. John is owner of Chesimard Partners and The Sybarite, which is a great name for a luxury channel. And John is going to tell us a little bit more about himself now.
Thanks, Pandora. So I'm John, one of the founders here at Sybarite. We like to pronounce it Sybarite, but correct pronunciation is Sybarite. And we're a luxury experiences online platform, which essentially means that we work with some amazing brands to curate one-of-a-kind, memorable luxury experiences. The business has been going since 2008. And we're a small team, so if you have a chance to look at our website, you probably will see quite a wide array of different experiences, across travel, dining, art, and many other categories that define us. So pleased to be here and hope I can be of use during this conversation.
Thank you, John. It's going to be a wealth of experience. And now I'd like to turn to, we're very fortunate today to have Paul Venn of Lincoln WPP. Paul, would you like to say a little bit more about what you do in your company?
Sure. Good day, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Yes, I work for one of the world's largest marketing services groups, that's WPP. And within WPP, my responsibility is to look after one of our major clients, and that is Ford Motor Company's Lincoln brand, which does business in the US, in North America more broadly, Canada, Mexico as well, and China, and several other markets around the world. So my responsibility is to look after that client within WPP. I'm also the CEO of one of the units within WPP, and that's Hudson Rouge. So named, by the way, because our first office was located in New York, near the Hudson River, and our second office was located in Detroit, given our client Lincoln, located near the River Rouge. So that's Hudson Rouge for you. And our Hudson Rouge's focus is really on premium and luxury brands. So we do work, of course, for Lincoln, but also some work for Rolex, some projects for Rolex, the Macallan whiskey. So we have a focus in the premium and luxury goods area.
Thank you, Paul. That's a great range of brands from which to draw experience on for the webinar. And then finally, I'd like to turn to George Gottel. George owns Uxus, which is a branding and creative agency. George, could you tell us a little bit more and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Pandora, for introducing me. Well, I don't own it. I used to. I'm the founder of Uxus, which means you times us. We're an end-to-end consumer experience agency. So we create consumer experiences in built environments. So we build, well, we first script what this experience could be, and then we build an envelope around that. So a retail experience, a pop-up, whatever it might be, a restaurant even. We work with such brands as Chanel, Bentley, Sephora, Bottega Veneta. But within our roster, we work even much more broadly than that. We also work with McDonald's, Shell, various other major multinational companies. The thing that ties them together is really the psychological approach that we have. We look at what the customer feels and what they're taking away from the experience and how we can amplify the brand within the space.
Thank you very much, George. That's fantastic. And so that leaves me to introduce myself, as well as being luxury director of Ioma. I run artonsuperyachts.com, which is a training and consultancy company dedicated to looking after and caring for the billions of pounds worth of priceless art that resides on super yachts. So Jonathan and I, in that respect, are a little bit in the same industry. And in fact, we were fellow speakers at the very last super yacht conference before COVID, in fact, in Hamburg. And then also since the pandemic struck, I have been taking this training online into an e-learning platform to deliver art appreciation, art management, export risks, and an art masterclass in art due diligence, because the art world is around 65 billion US dollars. So it's a significant luxury industry in itself. So with that lead in, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the luxury industry and invite our first speaker. So to put this in context, the luxury industry is around 1.27 trillion euros globally, depending, of course, on which metrics we use. This is a significant industry and obviously very important for us at Ioma. It is one, of course, because of the restrictions on travel and other aspects, such as stores being closed. It has obviously been affected by COVID. Nevertheless, there have been some great wins in this industry for some of the brands. So, for instance, brands like eShopWorld have stated that their sales went up something like 170% in August, September, year on year over the previous year. So there is a positive outlook for us. And we would like today in this webinar to really look at how we can entice the luxury buyer, how we can understand them better in order to be able to obviously sell to them more and grow all our businesses. So what is the catalyst for this? I'm going to come into our first question now and come straight back to you, George, and I wonder if you could start us off with this one as a veteran of IORMA. We're looking at today's high velocity consumer. Today's luxury consumer, as we know, is extremely challenging. And we want to look at the sort of current consumption models and how we reflect on these and respond to them. And really, George, I'd like to ask you, with ever more demanding customers, how would you define the luxury buyer of today, and how could we really respond to them by understanding them better?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is not really necessarily about COVID. COVID is accelerating trends that were already embedded in the market prior to the pandemic. But what it's done is it's exasperated and accelerated behavior in people that was already happening with a younger generation. And so when we're talking about luxury, I think we need to talk about two forms of luxury. One is the traditional luxury that we're all familiar with. So very, status driven, possession of objects, the monetary value of something. And then the second one is really new luxury. And that's much more ethereal. And I think that's the one that everyone is struggling with, obviously, because when you have billionaires who are maybe anywhere between 24 and 45 years of age, they have a very different perspective about what is aspirational. And often what they're looking for is not necessarily what the traditional luxury consumer is looking for. Their values are much more about the benefit that the brand brings to themselves, the experience and how it helps transform them as an individual, and also the value and the aspirational value within their peer group. So it's sometimes when you're dealing with this consumer, a lot of people don't necessarily recognize the things that are considered aspirational for that consumer. One of the areas that's exploding is sneakers. Like, who would think that sneakers would become a high-priced, highly sought-after commodity on the marketplace? And these are brands that everybody knows. Everybody knows Adidas. Everybody knows Nike. These are brands that have had the foresight to collaborate with leading opinion makers within the peer groups that they're trying to target. And once they collaborate with, let's say, a Travis Scott, I don't know if anyone's heard of him. He's a rapper. He just did a big collaboration with McDonald's. His action figure that McDonald's released is now worth $55,000 online. Those are the kinds of individuals that drive brands. And right now, those opinion makers that obviously are very digitally savvy, because this has a lot to do with social media and exposure, drive what's considered valuable, quote unquote, versus the traditional luxury, which was often about craftsmanship, heritage. It was attached to aristocracy. And now that attachment to luxury is severed. And it has nothing to do with aristocracy, but cultural currency and contemporary cultural currency. So brands that can tap into that cultural currency are the ones that are winning.
Thank you, George. That's really, really interesting perspective. And looking at the luxury buyers and how, the demographic is changing and becoming younger. Jonathan Beckett of Burgess Yachts, I wonder if I could come to you on this point, because I do understand a little bit that with yachting, you're also seeing younger buyers from time to time, and you're also seeing younger buyers looking at charter. Could you sort of talk a little bit about your clients and your market?
Hello. So certainly we're seeing a younger clientele today, and I always wonder, is it because I'm getting older or a client's getting younger? But definitely clients are getting younger. When I was a young man working in this industry, most of our clients were probably at least in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And today that still is the case, that many of our clients are of that age group. but we also have clients, you know, from the age of, let's say, 25 to 45. And some of those clients are extremely wealthy. Some of them are billionaires. And the way we sell to the younger clients is very different to the way we would sell to an older established client. And what they want to buy is different. I think we're talking about luxury here. We're selling, you know, luxury super yachts, but, you know, the vessels themselves are full of luxury, but probably the ultimate luxury is the client buying the yacht and actually having the time to spend with his family on board the yacht, and that precious time, family time that they have together in a very special environment. And I think that's the true luxury of super yachting. But what do we do in terms of the younger clientele? I think, you know, we were talking about this yesterday, and if you are, you know, a 50-year-old or 60-year-old client, you may want to have a house in Greenwich, Connecticut, or in the Hamptons, or in the countryside in England. But if you're a 30 or 35-year-old client, you probably want a very cool penthouse apartment in downtown New York or in London, and you know, you don't want a Rolls-Royce Phantom, you want a Ferrari, or you want a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin. And so we have to think very carefully about the type of yachts we're selling to younger people, what is appealing to them, and the way, you know, the way we're quite a conservative company. You can see I'm wearing a tie today, and that's the normal sort of office dress here at Burgess. But you know, when we're selling to younger clients, we might be wearing polo shirts and a pair of shorts when we meet them. So you know, it's very much a matter of adapting yourself to the clientele and really understanding what it is that they're looking for and what it is that they want in terms of communication.
Thank you, Jonathan. Nice to see the tie. I think with working from home, we have all become a lot more relaxed about our dress. I could make some jokes about that, but I will move swiftly on to John Kofi now, because you mentioned time, Jonathan, and John Kofi, your products or your services are very much about making the time that your customers have really relevant and making the most of it. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your customers and how that works for them.
Absolutely. And without wishing to sound repetitive, but I am going to absolutely agree with what George has mentioned, what Jonathan has said about the definition of luxury and the shifts that we've seen, the considerable shifts in demographics that we've seen over the last, I would say, 10 years or so. Obviously, we've been in business since 2008, but even within that short frame of time, we've seen a shift from luxury being status-driven, quality-driven, price-driven, to more of a combination of the creation of time, healthy living, and education and culture. And those elements really, we're not saying that the two categories are mutually exclusive, but it's almost as if the emphasis or the spotlight is shifting away from how much this a particular item will cost to what value and what benefits it will bring when it comes to time, health, and culture and other aspects of experiencing a service or a product. So just a quick note on demographics in terms of age. Again, absolutely agree with George and Jonathan there. We've seen a shift from, I would say, 50 pluses sort of buying products to them, seeking to do a bit more with their lives and with the time that they have, and being interested in experiences, typically travel-related experiences, but also it could be as simple as private dining or a shopping experience as well. For the younger demographics, so let's call them the 24-year-olds to perhaps the mid-40s, that sort of millennial Gen Z group are a lot more receptive, to the concept of an experience, of value-driven experiences, more so than conspicuous consumption, or indeed, how much they paid for a nice looking bag. Which is not to say, Ian, that that bags are not high on the list this Christmas for Christmas presents. Highly recommend an Aspinall branded bag, but it's really what you do with it now that people are seeking to focus on, and at least that's what we've seen.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, John. And before I turn to Ian, Paul, perhaps I could bring you in here. Because obviously you're working with a number of different luxury brands. How do you sort of see about the sort of challenging demands about these consumers today when we're talking about the challenges that we face as luxury marketers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to start just with that idea of how one might just define a luxury consumer in the marketplace today, or the buyer today. I think one of the things is that they're as discerning as they ever were, right? So discernment is a key aspect of luxury, and I think the modern luxury buyer, is as discerning as they ever were, but they're discerning in different ways, and I think that's what the other panelists have picked up on, and I certainly wouldn't deviate from what they've said at all. I think the simplest way I can put it was two things. One is people have touched on the idea of experiences versus products. I think the two go hand in hand, or can go hand in hand, and we're seeing business models, change to allow for that. So, in one of the markets I'm involved in, the car market, you're seeing brands create wonderful and very expensive experiences for drivers, right? So, the Porsche Driving Center in California, the BMW one, Jeep has something. These brands are now producing experiences as well as offering you, a vehicle to buy or to lease. So I think that we're seeing, kind of business model changes. I think also we're seeing advertisers, if you want to put it like that, or brands thinking about their audience of tomorrow, not just their audience of today. And I think George touched on that in the way in which he approaches different audiences. One of the pressures of business is to use advertising funding to drive business today, and that's not necessarily what we're about in the luxury field. It's about appealing to those audiences of tomorrow, knowing that those audiences to tomorrow are not looking at their mothers and fathers today for the clues of how they want to behave or how they want to indulge themselves. So allocating resource to the buyer of tomorrow is a difficult thing to do because it doesn't necessarily drive revenue today, but it's massively important if you want to stay relevant. So so I think discernment still there, but getting at those audiences of tomorrow in a different way is important.
Thank you very much. That's really important, Paul. Ian, if I could turn to you and sort of lead into our second question, bearing in mind your market, how should aspirational branding respond to our new luxury environment? And we're looking at, status here, and it's not necessarily about what you have and what you can buy, but what you know, or maybe who you know. Would you like to talk to that a little bit?
Yes, look, I'm deeply humbled because we have a very esteemed panel here with great wide experience,
including you, of course.
Well, thank you. I mean, when I look at any issue, and I don't mean to intellectualize about this particularly, I just go back to basics, and I would just say, to agreeing with what George said, but in a different way. What is the definition of luxury? What does it mean before, and what is it metamorphosizing into? That's, what I mean with that word. I mean, the luxury traditional definition, or the definition of luxury traditionally, probably we'd all agree is craftsmanship and very quality materials, whether that's in a yacht, a Bentley, or an Aspinall handbag. Those are traditionally what the definitions are. And I like what Paul was also saying about that word discernment. But yeah, those are the traditional definitions of luxury that I think people do still want. Whilst things are definitely changing in the youth market particularly, I think there's always going to be a place for that, okay? Quality and craftsmanship by virtue is expensive. So most luxury items are expensive, okay? So we're coming from that. And I think George said luxury of the last 100 years has been about the aristocracy. I thought that was a great point because, it kind of does come from that, but it is filtered down now to to the middle classes as well. And I think we're all here to talk about how are we selling our products? Okay, what have we got in the deck, in our deck of cards? Okay, so to me, first of all, quality and craftsmanship, I think, will always be here. Obviously, to go with that is the other traditional valuation of authenticity and scarcity, and with those things comes desirability. But if I was to sum all of that up with everything that we're all doing with this experiences, buying a whiskey, that's possibly different, buying a fine wine, buying a boat, buying a car, to my mind, and the way I'm thinking, there are two things that really are driving all of this. The first king in your deck of cards is appreciation. And we've discussed that in terms of appreciation is also desirability and discernment. What does it do for you when you get it? Do you really appreciate it? Whether it's time on your boat, driving your Bentley, what does it do for you? So I think appreciation is the king. And if obvious to me, the next most important thing, which wraps it all up, George mentioned it, everybody's mentioned it about peer groups, but actually what that boils down to, your ace in your pack of cards is it cool, right? Are you buying something that's cool? Because everybody wants something that's cool. And George also mentioned Nike or Travis Scott, $55,000 piece of plastic that's just been put into McDonald's, and the next day is worth, and it probably costs 10 cents, and the next day it's worth $55,000. There's only one reason, because it's the coolest thing on the planet and it's scarce. You can't get hold of it. He wants one, and it's going to go into the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco in 5 years from now. So that's what we're all here to do, drive our businesses. And I sum it all up, I do think the old world of tradition, there's always a place for that in the middle classes and every class. I always actually, whenever I talk about Aspinall, I always say we are a democratic brand, that, a CEO and a billionaire will have an Aspinall briefcase or whatever it might be, an Aspinall handbag. But if you go into Canary Wharf, where we used to have a store, every secretary's got an Aspinall purse as well. And it's like driving a Mini. You can be as rich as whoever and have an Aspinall bag, or you can be a secretary and have an Aspinall bag as well. So that's what I call about being a democratic brand. And I think those values of providing something that is truly got craftsmanship, beautiful quality materials, and at a reasonable price, I think there'll always be a place for that. But it is crazy that somebody will go and pay $55,000 for a McDonald's piece of plastic. So, what is going on? And that's what today's conversation is about. And we've got some, look forward to continuing it.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'm definitely there with you with that on the figurines. It's quite extraordinary. But it's quite interesting to sort of return to this concept, or this traditional concept of luxury as craftsmanship, heritage, authenticity, scarcity, and then the appreciation and desirability, and generally about luxury as being something which is a little bit beyond your reach, with the exception of what, you know, Vincent Bastien-Avache say, who teaches the luxury management program. They talk about these little luxuries. So for all of us to go and buy a great perfume or a Chanel soap is still a little luxury.
Pandora, that's exactly what I say all the time. I go, you know, sorry to talk about Aspinall, I don't mean to, but it's a little bit of luxury that everybody can afford. And by the way, no one's mentioned yet in this panel, we're talking about mainly self-purchase, but don't forget the gifting. You know, the gifting world is probably half of all the spending in luxury at least. And what do you gift when you're gifting a little bit of luxury?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, thank you. Well, actually, I'd like to now develop this argument and return to George Gottl, because I'd like to sort of extend that to sort of look at really, well, luxury has a price, and we're talking about access and things being a little bit beyond our reach, perhaps. But is it now more aligned to knowledge and whether or not you can get access to these products? I mean, I work in the art world, and just because you might be a billionaire, it doesn't mean to say you can get your hands on a certain artwork, because these are highly controlled in many cases. But George, could you talk to us a little bit about access and the new sort of luxury aspiration?
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you came to me, because I wanted to reiterate something that Ian just said about coolness. Because luxury is actually about cultural currency. So it really, and I don't want to contradict anyone, but it's really not about craftsmanship or quality. That's about the value of the object itself. That's not about what is aspirational or what is considered luxury in the sense of status within your peer group. And I want to use an example. I want to contrast the Travis Scott figurine from McDonald's with an Hermes Kelly bag. They're actually exactly the same, in the sense that the reason it's a Kelly bag, it's because it's Grace Kelly, Princess of Monaco, who used to carry the bag from Hermes. And it made that bag incredibly desirable within the social groups of ladies who lunch. So now the value of a 55 or 60,000 Kelly, pound Kelly bag is the same as the plastic figurine. The bag doesn't cost that much to make, no way. I'm a fashion designer by trade. I know for a fact that no matter how good the materials are, unless you're using precious metals and stones, there's no way that that product is going to cost that much. The value, again, is a cultural perception of being cool. And at the time, Grace Kelly was the coolest, most aspirational lady within the group that, were purchasing those kinds of products. Just like today, Travis Scott is. So I think, when you're talking about the value of something versus, what it's actually worth, it has absolutely nothing to do with the product or the object itself. It has to do with the cultural currency. And so therefore, when you really look at what luxury today means, it's really about access, knowledge, the ability to do something that no one else can. And we always laugh because amongst young luxury consumers, the coolest thing to own isn't the latest collection from Vuitton, the menswear, collection from Vuitton, like spring 2021. The coolest thing to own is the staff t-shirt from the show, that you were part of the insider group of people. That is much more valuable. If you were to put that on, eBay or whatever, the price would probably, or stocks, the price would probably go nuts for something like that, versus the actual object. Because again, it means that you're socially connected, that you're in the know, that you're within a certain peer group that's very aspirational. That's where luxury is today. The status doesn't necessarily come from the actual object, but from the cultural currency, or what Ian said, which I think is so, so true, the coolness of whatever it is, whether it's an experience, product, or, a store or whatever, a destination.
Thank you very much. That's a really good perspective. John, Kofi, perhaps I could just come back to you on this and really to extend this development and probe a little bit further into access and what you feel really is considered luxury today from your perspective or the perspective of your clients.
Absolutely, and I'd like to also pick up on a couple of things that George mentioned in that last segment, but also what Ian talked about coolness, and I think that's so pertinent for a luxury product or an experience. But when it comes to the question of value and how valuable we consider an experience or a product to be, it really does depend on tribalism in many ways, as we found, and that's why experiences and whoever participates in a particular experience is always the watch point, isn't it? That's what people look for. Who's involved, who's participating in this experience in the Maldives. Who's able to travel to the Maldives during this pandemic. And I'm just citing that as an example. And I must add that influencers are a great asset when it comes to placing value or adding value to an experience, and also to products. And I'd be interested to have Ian's take on this, and whether Ian's encouraged any influencers to represent the Aspinall brand, because I think it would be great to have an idea as to whether, from a product perspective and a leading label that really has strong historic roots in tradition, would have an influencer contribute towards placing value on a product bought from the shelves. But Ian, I don't know if I could.
Olivia, I mean, of course, John. Everybody knows that everything's about influencers now, and we work with. Oh God, I wish we could work and afford to work with more, but we have probably, the 30 influencers that we work with all the time, providing us content that we use on our Instagram, on our social channels. Of course, I mean, last year we did the most fantastic collaboration with David Gandy. We all know David Gandy, absolutely supermodel, and we've worked with many from Elizabeth Hurley, Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey. We did a fantastic collaboration. So collaborations and influences are, of course, what it's all about now. And it all goes back to the same thing that I think everybody's agreeing on here: peer group and coolness. Are you cool? Do you belong? Does this product, is it acceptable? Is it desirable within my peer group? And am I proud to have it? Do I appreciate, and do all my friends think I'm cool because I've got it? I think, in a very simplified version, I think we're actually all agreeing that that's a very important part of everything that is luxury today. But yeah, John, of course, and we would love to do more with influencers. They're all just so very expensive.
They're becoming very powerful now. Very powerful now. At this point, could I just bring in Jonathan Beckett, because when we talk about peer groups, there is quite a peer group with the super yacht industry, and yacht owners like to compete with each other, certainly for their art on board, but also in the other aspects of super yachts. So Jonathan, could you talk a little bit about access and the peer groups and how important owning the right super yacht or chartering the right yacht is for these owners?
I think it is very important. We always used to say, and I think it's changed, I think sort of the slogan has changed a little bit today compared to, say, 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, the slogan, mine is bigger than yours, was very, very important. And if you had an owner who owned a yacht of 70 meters and his friend was building something similar, it would always be 71 or 72 or 75. It would never be 65 or 69. So, mine is bigger than yours was very much, an important selling point, I guess, in our business. Today, people keep saying size matters. Does size matter? And actually, size does matter. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have the largest yacht in the world. Size matters and quality matters. So what really matters is that you have a yacht that is the right size for you and for your family. and not necessarily the largest yacht. And so, you know, I think we're here to sort of educate buyers, owners, charterers about what it is and what sort of size of boat they want. And it could well be somebody is thinking that they want a boat that's going to be 90 meters, let's say, and they'd be quite comfortable on a 65-meter boat with a more intimate environment and more, you know, smaller crew and a more friendly sort of family-based. And that's what luxury is, I think. It's feeling comfortable in your own surroundings and enjoying the environment of being on board one of our boats. And sometimes if you're on a yacht that's very large, it can feel a little bit like staying in a hotel. You know, some of the very large yachts have got a crew of, you know, 70, 80, 90 people for maybe 20 guests. And it's impossible to know the names of all the crew members. If you're on a yacht of maybe 60 meters, you'll have 12 guests and you'll have maybe 18 crew. But that, you know, you will know the crew, they will know you, they know exactly what it is, you know, the sort of service levels that you like. They know the way you like your bed turned down, they know the temperature of the bath you like to have poured, they know the thing that you like to have a skinny cappuccino in the morning, and everybody knows everyone's name. And that's truly a luxury, I think. So size does matter, and size doesn't necessarily mean being the largest. It means being, you know, the best fit for you and for your family.
I think that's very true, and I think it's super yachting as well. As I understand it, we've seen a return to some of the smaller yachts because actually they can be parked in the most beautiful places rather than having to be anchored out at sea. And it was all about not just what you own, but the experience you've got because of owning it, which was the point that Ian made.
That's my excuse for only having a 48-foot boat.
There we go. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're all coming for a Christmas party.
You can get into the restaurants, you can get into the shores, you can go wherever you want. It's a really good excuse to say I haven't got the money.
Great. Yeah. Well, we have about a quarter of an hour left, and we have quite a few questions that have come through. So I would not be doing my job if I didn't turn to those now. And we've had a question from Joanna Park-Tonts, who's owner of Chelsea Rocks, which is laboratory grown diamonds. I can feel another luxury webinar coming on with jewelry here. But she asks the panelists, and I might start with you on this, Paul, then, is the term luxury in danger of becoming obsolete in view of the suffering caused with the pandemic? How has your understanding of the term changed, both personally and professionally in the light of COVID? And do we need to find a new word for luxury in the times that we're living in? Well, this is quite a lot to answer, but perhaps we could look really at this in terms of how the brands can stay relevant and desirable and operate during COVID. Paul, could you?
Yeah, there's a huge amount there, and of course I'm gonna answer all of it. No, there's a huge amount there. So let me try and pick my way through it in a certain way here. You know, luxury, we can call it different things, but at the end of the day, it's for us at Hudson Rouge, we describe it as the creation of desire beyond reason. There's many different, you know, definitions of luxury. But that for us is strikes home. It's desire, creating desire beyond reason. And you know, how do brands stay relevant in either this COVID era that we're living in or outside of that? I think they stay relevant in a number of ways. One is you know, gestures and behaviors are really important. So the way a brand demonstrates relevance to a COVID world is through its gestures and its behaviors. So, you know, you had fashion houses creating, you know, antiseptics, right? And that was a behavior that they felt compelled to do. So they maintained relevance in that way. They gave to society in that way. But broadly speaking, gestures and behaviors are massively important. If anybody's read Jean-Noël Capra in his book about luxury, he talks about, you know, you communicate with your customers, you don't advertise. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And you can communicate to your customers through, you know, behaviors and actions. and you make those behaviors and actions relevant to the time that you're living in. I think the other thing you do with luxury, and it's very strange to say this, and actually at the agency we kind of emphasize it 3 times. We say it's about restraint, restraint, and restraint. Luxury brands are never pushy, and perhaps they need to be careful in COVID era around how pushy they are, how obvious they are. So restraint is important. The power of a luxury brand is in its magnetism, is in its charisma, and and that's about learning when not to do something, when not to say something, when not to insert yourself somewhere, and that creates a kind of magnetism. I think the other thing there's 2 other things that I think are relevant to, or that help brands stay relevant in the current world, and that is think of them as cults. People don't necessarily buy a thing or an experience, but they do buy the idea that's behind that. And so I think that if you think about the way in which a brand can create a cult-like following, I think that's another aspect that can help you maintain relevance in today's world. And finally, particularly if you look at founders of luxury brands, you see people who have incredible vision, and they lead. They don't follow, they lead, and they are prepared to be criticized for the daring nature of their vision. But I think that is the one thing that is going to sustain, well, frankly, any business is vision and leadership, but particularly so in the luxury world.
Thank you very much. We've had another question from John Andrews, our chairman, so we had better pose that one. John, thank you. Might the term luxury perhaps be becoming something of an anachronism in today's and tomorrow's post-COVID normality? And this is something we touched on as a group here just before the call. What are we going to call luxury in the future? Is this term now still relevant, and how do we bring in these aspects of sort of sustainability and that sort of thing with brands? Is there anyone that would like to speak to that perhaps?
I'd like to address actually something that's happening across all sectors in terms of relevance and staying relevant. And I think that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind for any brand in the future is about driving purpose and values. Brands today can't just represent sales. They can't just represent we sell products. They have to represent how they're contributing back to society and how socially responsible they are to the society. I mean, we cannot discount environmentalism, social responsibility, inclusivity and equality in the conversation about luxury. So I don't think the word luxury is an anachronism. The behavior of old brands is an anachronism. So if you're just about being fabulous and subjugating people and being exclusive with them to in a cruel extent, then of course, yes, that should no longer exist because it's no longer relevant to a modern consumer. Modern consumers, and particularly young people, are incredibly conscious of the environment, of social responsibility, of inclusivity and acceptance across the board. I think, when we look at what is happening with younger demographics, it is a complete redefinition of where values have been in the past. So I think that the word luxury is not, I think it's an excellent question. It's the word itself in terms of it representing traditional luxury, yes. Representing new luxury with the social responsibility and value-driven component, no. It can continue.
Great, thank you. And we have a question here from Gary Bird. Hello, Gary. A question directed primarily to Jonathan, as you're in the super yacht world as well. Fascinated by the perspectives. When engaging with owners' representatives, we prefer to listen, understand, and then create solutions that speak to the actual need. They often approach issues from a diametrically a diametrically opposed perspective, where the solution, and usually the newest shyness capability, has been predetermined. How does one resolve this dichotomy with others when others will happily speak to the desire rather than to tailor it to the needs? So I don't know if you can pick up from that, Jonathan. I didn't read it too well, but I think it's really looking at the aspects of how we can tailor what we have to the new luxury buyer.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're in a market which is a very, very specialized market. And obviously in today's world, everyone is looking at sustainability, the environment, and trying to build the yachts to be carbon neutral, environmentally friendly. And it's a whole educational process. We're learning ourselves. We have a team of experts in-house who get very involved in, you know, propulsion systems and reuse of heating systems and that sort of thing. And I think you can't tell a client, you can't tell one of our clients what they have to have. I think you have to educate them carefully and slowly. And there is definitely a shift in our market in terms of clients being prepared to listen to what is sensible and practical and environmentally friendly. And our industry is changing enormously at the moment. You know, I've been working in this industry for nearly 40 years. I have a son who works with me, and you know, he's obviously a generation down. But we employ a lot of young people here at Burgess, and it's actually very exciting to talk to them and listen to them. And we have to listen to them because the future of our industry is the next generation, and they are the people who will be, you know, building and selling this product to the next generation. And we will see some enormous advances and enormous changes in our industry, which will be very exciting, I think, for the future. So I would say, you know, you can't tell any of our clients what they must have. You have to try to educate them, and you have to try to lead them by example, and sort of try to sort of, you know, when you get them close to the edge, maybe you can push them over the edge, but you have to gradually lead them to the edge and not pull them, not pull them along with you. So yeah, it's a lot of it is about education, and you know, a lot of it is about the next generation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just stick with you for a moment because I've got one final question for the panelists. We have 5 minutes, so not too long per person, but Jane Calvert-Lee asks, are we seeing more female luxury buyers? Is that demographic changing? I believe it is, but can you tell me from your perspective, Jonathan, very quickly, are you seeing more female?
We are seeing some more female buyers, and I think we will see many more actually in the coming 5 to 10 years. It has been a very male-dominated market, but that is definitely changing. And I would say that, you know, we have as much as 10% female clientele now, but 10%. You know, it's certainly not 50-50, but that, you know, wealth is being created by both male and female. And I think we will see many more, you know, females buying and chartering yachts in the future.
Thank you. Ian Burton, obviously you have a very large female demographic at Aspinall.
Very, very simple answer. 70% of all of our customers are female. They always have been. That needle doesn't seem to move ever, although we sell 50% of everything we sell is for male audience, and 50% is for female. 70% of our customers are women. And to reflect what everybody's saying, over the last 3 to 4 years, our demographic of young people, which of 20 to 30 years of age, was the smallest. It is now the largest, just like that, in 3 to 4 years. is, which I think is great. And then I also just want to quickly recap on what George also said. There is no, for want of a better word, old luxury, which we kind of talk about old luxury, new luxury. I totally agree. There's not going to be any old luxury unless every brand, and we all know this, is going to completely respond to sustainability and environmental concerns. That's a given.
Thank you. And John Kofi, your clients, what is the percentage of females?
Well, it's evenly split. When we first started the business, it was 60% male, 40% female, but it's a dead heat at the moment. And and I think we've got to also pay attention as to the gifting market, which Ian talked about earlier on. So are a certain demographic buying luxury items and luxury experiences for themselves, or are they gifting it? So it'll be interesting, maybe as part of the next conversation, to dig a bit deeper into that.
Absolutely, thank you. Paul Venn, very quickly, are we seeing more female luxury buyers, or is it too difficult to answer that question in half a minute?
Okay, 30 seconds. Here we go. Cars and drink, not two categories that usually go together well. 50% of the people driving cars and vehicles more generally on the roads are women. So it's not a question of are we seeing more women, it's a question of how do we make women feel. And it's not only about women, how do we make diverse audiences generally feel when we interact with them. So that would be my answer there. And I can certainly tell you there are more whiskey drinkers that are female these days than there ever used to be. I can't put a number on it, but I know that's the case. And so again, once again, it's about how do we make them feel when they interact with our brand. And it's fair to say in the past, they probably felt quite excluded, and that is not the way that's going to sustain any business in the future.
Okay, thank you. This is very useful. And finally, George.
Oh, well, I mean, again, it depends on the sector, right? The biggest volume of luxury sales by far are female. So if you look at the giant luxury conglomerates, Kering, LVMH, those type of businesses are multi hundreds of billions of pounds, euros, dollar businesses, all driven by female consumers. If you're looking at yachts, cars, drink, generally male, watches, male driven. So it's really by sector, but by far, that's why I found the question actually kind of surprising. Females are the ones that consume luxury by far. It's the guys who like to buy big toys, but women are the ones that buy on a continuous basis.
Thank you. Well, we have just about come to the end, and it's down to me now to wrap up, but I would like to thank Ian Burton, George Gottel, John Kofi, Paul Venn, Jonathan Beckett for your amazing input. This has been really, really fantastic. And I think we've managed to really look at how we've shaped the luxury industry and how we've redefined that luxury buyer as perhaps younger, increasingly discerning, concerned with sustainability and issues which are affecting us today, and looking at really redefining what we understand as the word luxury. So thank you very much. This recording is going to be available on the IORMA website in the next few days, I think, and registrants will no doubt be getting an email to that effect. I'm sorry we haven't got to all your questions. I did see quite a few here because there's a lot of participants. So I'm sorry we couldn't get to those. Maybe we can find another way of answering those in a paper in response to this. Our next webinar will be on the 26th, I understand, Thursday, the 26th of this month, and it will be on the insurance industry and the disruption to the insurance industry. So if any of you have, and I'm sure you do know people in insurance, please, we will be sending out notifications, and it would be great to get your input. My alarm for 3 o'clock has just gone off, so we've just covered that with all the time. And I'd like to thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you in the not so distant future.